It's Halloween, which is of course everyone's favorite time to reflect on the spooky stuff in our lives. We've all got our own Halloween traditions. Some of us watch horror movies, some of us dress up and go to parties, and some of us just eat candy. Me personally, I've always been one for celebrating the seasonally spooky content in video games. And while I could spend a day talking about Dead Space or Resident Evil or Amnesia or something, there's a game far scarier than any of those combined that actually celebrates its 1-year anniversary today on Halloween. Okay, maybe Luigi's Mansion isn't the scariest series, but for what it is, it's a fun, charming, and decidedly unique spin on the Mario series. Putting Luigi, everyone's favorite ghost-fearing number 2, in the starring role is a stroke of genius as well. So today, on Halloween, I thought I'd take the opportunity to revisit the most recent adventure in the series, Luigi's Mansion 3 for Nintendo Switch. This is a game that had a decent degree of build-up surrounding it for what it was. It got a lot of FaceTime at Nintendo Directs, even appearing at Nintendo's E3 2019 Direct. It was previewed by press outlets and was released on Halloween, which made it a perfect candidate for some family Halloween fun. It also got some DLC and post-launch support, won Best Family Game at the Game Awards 2019, and as of now has sold over 6 million copies. All in all, a success. Let's try and figure out why on Halloween. Luigi's Mansion 3 was developed by Next Level Games, a Canadian team known for their work on games like the Mario Strikers series, Punch-Out for the Wii, and most importantly, Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon. Considering their track record, it's safe to say that Luigi's Mansion 3 was in good hands. The game itself is rather uniquely set in a hotel rather than a traditional mansion, and it was apparently the developer's goal to fill it with as many non-traditional rooms and levels as possible. An admirable effort to say the least, but without further ado, let's get into the game. Our story follows Luigi as he's invited to the subtly named Last Resort Hotel on an all-inclusive vacation alongside Mario, Peach, Three Toads, and Polterpup. Things seem alright at first, save for the strange hotel staff and very suspicious hotel owner, who's literally named Helen Gravely, and Luigi quickly falls asleep upon arriving in his room. He's later woken up by the sound of Peach screaming and sets out to investigate. From here, things are different. The hotel is now gothic, dark, and spooky, and Luigi's friends are nowhere to be seen. He shortly encounters Helen Gravely, who reveals herself to be a ghost, and that the entire hotel invitation was a scheme to capture Luigi and his friends by the newly released King Boo. A chase ensues, and Luigi manages to escape into the hotel's basement. He then finds a new and improved Poltergust, and later finds a captured Professor Egad, who he quickly frees. Egad provides Luigi with a base of operations in the hotel's basement, augments him with all sorts of new Poltergust abilities, and sends him on his way to save his friends. This is where the game begins proper. Starting from the top, this game is absolutely gorgeous visually. Even if it wasn't directly developed by Nintendo, I'm comfortable saying that it's probably the best looking Mario-related game on Switch. The colors, lighting, and shadows are all beautiful, and the game is just so animated and filled with life. None of the characters ever look like video game models snapping into a sequence. Everyone looks organic and natural. Luigi is probably the most expressive and characterful he's ever been as well. It's not just fear either, this is important. He's allowed to express a wide array of emotions throughout the game. I love how he happily proclaims, "I'm a star!" after clearing the movie theater floor, or how he looks tired after watching Mario jump to fight the final boss. Like, come on man, I've had a long day. And this doesn't just apply to Luigi either. Pretty much every character is animated in such an expressive and lively way. Even the ghosts, which is funny considering that they're supposed to be dead. I know some people took issue with the lack of enemy variety, considering that there are less than 10 unique enemy ghosts in the game, but considering how lively and animated they all are, I really didn't mind. They're constantly getting new outfits and props to play around with. The game also has a great physics engine, sometimes literally tossing physics objects at you for you to kick around. It's great. Sadly, this stellar presentation doesn't come without a cost. While the game runs well and maintains a silky smooth frame rate throughout, it's an absolute battery hog. It tears through battery life in handheld mode, and even in docked mode, I found my Switch running hot and losing charge while I was playing. This could be a personal problem since I have had my Switch since 2018, but it's still something to watch out for. Onto a bit more of the non-graphical presentation, the game's music is fine. Nothing I'd really describe as earworms like the original Luigi's Mansion theme, but it's all atmospheric and properly spooky in a good way while also conveying the themes of each floor. The game is also riddled with fan service, featuring things like Mario Strikers and Punch-Out posters on the movie theater floor, and having Luigi's main mode of communicating with Egad throughout the game be a virtual boy. They even lampshade its failure, which is hilarious. I'm inclined to believe that this kind of stuff wouldn't have made the game if it was in-house developed by Nintendo, so it's really great to have here. But of course, nothing about the game's presentation matters if Luigi's Mansion 3 isn't fun to play, so let's move on to gameplay. The game follows a simple structure, with Luigi traveling to each different floor of the hotel and recovering the lost elevator buttons to travel to the next. Each floor contains its own puzzles, secrets, ghost encounters, and bosses, and the variety present is amazing. Like I said earlier, the developers explicitly set out to fill the games with floors that would seem out of place in a traditional hotel, and it really shows. You've got stuff like a movie studio, a sandy tomb filled with traps, a pirate-themed indoor dock, and many more. While not all of the floors are winners, I really didn't enjoy the Boiler Works or Garden Suites, for example. The variety among them keeps the game from getting too stale. The boss fights are really fun too. Fans of the original were disappointed by the lack of unique boss ghosts in the second game, so next level games really swung back hard in the third. These bosses are just so fun and so full of personality, and most of them are fun braid teasers with tricky puzzles to figure out how to damage them. Again, they're not all winners, there's definitely some that I disliked, such as Clem, but they're still mostly great. But what about the combat itself? The early Luigi's Mansion games have a bit of a reputation for being repetitive in this regard, but luckily I think Luigi's Mansion 3 handles things well. Combat is simple. You flash ghosts with your flashlight and then suck them up. After your A meter is filled while sucking up a ghost, Luigi can then use his new slam technique to deal massive damage. Taking a hint from Brock Lesnar, Luigi sends the ghost to Suplex City using his vacuum, dealing a large amount of damage per slam. This can also be used to slam into and stun other ghosts, disarming them and setting up combos. While the slam carries the majority of the game's combat and might get repetitive for some players, I think it's just satisfying enough to be fun for the whole game. The game steadily drip feeds you more kinds of ghosts to fight, as well as regular ghosts using defensive items to block your flashlight, so every encounter can become a bit of a puzzle. It's nice. The slam isn't all that Luigi's capable of in this game though, far from it. In fact, this is where one of my personal problems with the game comes in. Luigi can arguably do too much. You can suck and blow things with your poltergust, do a short jump that repels nearby objects and enemies, use the dark light from Dark Moon to reveal hidden objects and areas, use the new suction shot to shoot a plunger that Luigi can grab onto, allowing him to pull things, and most importantly, can summon Gooigi. This slimy stand of Luigi's is meant to be the game's player 2, but works just fine in single player as well. He shares all of Luigi's abilities, and the player will oftentimes have to swap between the two of them to combine their abilities. Luigi falls unconscious while Gooigi is in control too, which is just the creepiest visual. Gooigi also has his own health bar and can be infinitely respawned, so he makes a nice meat shield, goo shield, for tricky bosses. So what's the problem with all of this? Well, while I do appreciate the variety at Luigi's disposal, I also think it kind of drags down the puzzles. This is an incredibly puzzle-oriented game, and you'll be using all of your abilities throughout. Because of this, some solutions can tend to seem clouded or bloated as you swap between all of your individual abilities to find the right one or even combination to use. I think the blacklight is the worst offender, since its gameplay can arguably come down to just pointing it everywhere and see if it finds something, but Luigi having so much to do in this game can genuinely drag things down at times. I do really like Gooigi's presence in this game though. Even if he is just an emotionless slime, he provides a nice feeling of companionship throughout. A spooky mansion isn't as spooky when you've got a friend with you. There's also quite a few occasions where Luigi gets trapped and Gooigi is the only one who can save him, so he's a good goo boy. He's also able to walk through fences, spikes, and drains, and dies in water, so be careful. Speaking of Luigi getting trapped though, our boy kinda goes through the ringer in this game. While nothing too terribly graphic happens obviously, I was genuinely taken back by how much Luigi can be beat up in this game. It's a neat side effect of the game's more expressive animation, I guess. With all this in mind though, I do want to mention probably my biggest problem with the game. Its length and padding. Luigi's Mansion 1 is not a long game and can be beaten in about one sitting if you know what you're doing. Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon fares a bit better, and being on the 3DS encourages short bursts of playtime. Luigi's Mansion 3 though? Well, this game can take anywhere from 15 to 20 hours to beat in a casual playthrough, which might not sound too bad, but considering how slow and puzzle-oriented it is, it can really drag at times. My first playthrough clocked in at just under 15 hours, and there were so many times where I was checking my watch. There are 17 floors to explore, and they often need to be returned to in these really obvious and unnecessary filler sections. You have to go back to fight this ghost cat named Polterkitty twice, and you have to return to the Boiler Works, my least favorite floor in the game, to save a lost toad near the end. This padding is particularly egregious considering that I think the game is more than long enough without it. And that's if you're just playing through the game casually. You can extend your playtime a lot if you go for 100% completion. You're ranked at the end of the game based on how much money you have, and there's also these gems and boos to find. Gems are the game's main collectible, with 6 hiding on each floor. They're genuinely fun to hunt down, if a bit daunting considering how many of them there are to find and how tricky some of them can be to find. I would recommend going for them though as much as you can, since there's a lot of optional secrets and content that you'll miss if you don't. As for the boos, they function similarly to how they did in the first game, with them hiding in props on completed floors. If you go back and check the right prop, a short battle ensues. If you check the wrong one, the boo automatically relocates. This can make the boos a bit annoying to hunt down, but luckily they all only have 20 HP, so they're not nearly as bad as the first game. Also, quick thing that I forgot to mention in the original script that I'm adding while editing, the boos are actually tracked by using how much your controller rumbles as a gauge for how nearby they are, so if you don't have a proper Switch Pro controller that rumbles, I definitely recommend either playing through the game with Joy-Cons or just not going for the boos. And I think that fully covers Luigi's Mansion 3 single player at a base. I could go more into detail about the individual floors or bosses, but I think for the sake of brevity and not spoiling the game's surprises, I'll avoid that. What I will be talking about though is multiplayer. Luigi's Mansion 3 has 2 proper multiplayer modes outside of the main game's co-op, the online Scare Scraper and the local Scream Park. Scare Scraper returns from Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon and allows up to 8 players, 4 Luigis and 4 Gooigis, to play through a gauntlet-style skyscraper filled with ghosts. You beat each floor's objectives and move on. It's nice, fun, and distracting, and surprisingly still has people playing as I'm recording this. I was comfortably able to find matches for this video. As for Scream Park, well, I wasn't able to play it sadly since it's local only and pandemic and all, but from what I've seen, it seems like a fun little party minigame style mode. These modes have also seen a fair bit of post-launch support in DLC, which is really interesting. If you've ever wanted to see Luigi with a pump, well, there you go. So that's Luigi's Mansion 3 without major spoilers. What was my final verdict? Well, it's a fun, visually striking Mario spin-off with a lot of character and even more heart. Sadly though, it's got some major problems in terms of its pacing and length, which I think makes it a bit draining to consider replaying. If you're thinking about picking it up a year out from launch, or just thinking about replaying it, I definitely recommend it, though hopefully at a price beneath $60 since you're not likely to be replaying it more than once in a great while. Regardless though, I still really like the game and I hope y'all enjoy. Happy Halloween.